Good afternoon. This is the regular board meeting of February 10, 2022. It is now 4:07 p.m. Please call the roll.
President Herrera,
Here.
Vice President Chavez,
Here.
Clerk Cortese,
Here.
Member Lay,
Here.
Member Doe is on his way.
Here, here, I'm on Zoom.
You're on Zoom.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Are there any, welcome to the board meeting of February 10, 2022. Are there any members of the public who would like to provide public comment to the board on a closed session agenda item at this time? Seeing none and hearing none, the board will now recess to closed session. Thank you. The board is resuming its meeting in open session. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and welcome to the meeting of the Board of Trustees on February 10, 2022. Members of the public, please submit your public comment online by accessing the form on the district's homepage at ESUHSD.org or the link on the agenda. Please limit your written comments to no more than 1,000 characters in length. Public comment submitted online will be read into the record. You may also raise your virtual hand in Zoom to request to speak. You will have 2 minutes to speak. Please note that all our meetings are recorded. All regular and special meetings of the Board of Trustees and board study sessions are streamed live on meeting nights and are also available for viewing the day after the meeting by accessing the district's YouTube channel listed on the district's webpage at esuhsd.org under the quick links section. The board is not able to respond to items that are not on the agenda or to any personnel related issues. Your comment will be read into the record and will be directed to the superintendent and or the appropriate staff member for response. Interpretation of this meeting in Spanish and Vietnamese can be heard by accessing the link and following the instructions shown on the agenda and on the district's website. Moving on to item 5.01, and this is where members of the board or the administration can ask for any changes in the agenda as published, whether we carry an item forward or we change the order or advance the order. Are there any requests?
Yes, on item 11.01, we would ask that the item remain. However, we'd like to remove the resolution AB 361.
On 11.01 to eliminate that whole item?
No, we will keep the presentation for 11.01, but we will not be taking action on the resolution for AB 361.
Okay, we'll just note that when we get to the item, since we're still keeping the item. All right, thank you. Can you, oh. Excuse me, folks. Pardon me while I got myself. So if there are no other requests under item 5.01, then we have item 0.601, staff building equitable communities. And I believe that's Associate Superintendent Marquez.
Yes, thank you, Board President. Good evening, Teresa Marquez, Associate Superintendent. And today it is my great pleasure to honor the honorees from our staff. The fellow staff members have been recognized by their administration as staff that is striving towards equitable communities. Our first honoree is Julissa Huerta Anaya, and she is a world language Spanish teacher at James Lake High School. And kudos from her principal read as follows. Julissa Huerta Anaya is a longtime comet. She comes in every day, ready and willing to do everything she can to improve the lives and futures of all of our students. Her class is a warm and welcoming place to be. As a teacher, she acknowledges and truly welcomes all students as they are, and I can truly attest that she knows every single one of her students along with their areas of strength and growth. During break, lunch, and after school, students flock to Ms. Huerta's classroom to just be around her and her positive and motivating energy. Students know that her classroom is a safe space to be in and that Ms. Huerta will support and listen to them without judgment, but even with an empathetic ear and heart. Ms. Huerta connects with school and community resources to help support her students' needs when it is something that she cannot support within the classroom. With her leadership, our school is able to host successful events like Dia de los Muertos and Posadas that bring together students, their work from various classes, staff, and our parents and community. Ms. Huerta truly embodies the Eastside Union High School District's heart and message that all students are welcome here. Our next honorees is the team from Piedmont Hills High School. It's the sub-coverage team, Asha Lujan, Rupert Rosales, Ursula Garcia, and Jocelyn Ramirez. And kudos from their principal read as follows. Everybody knows how difficult this year has been with finding sub-coverage. The Piedmont Hills High School teachers have been amazing with agreeing to cover classes. But before they can do this, Asha, Rupert, Ursula, and Jocelyn show amazing teamwork to figure out which classes need to be covered and finding the teachers to sub. They have this process down to a science, and I am so grateful for the work they do every morning. I sincerely hope that the nationwide sub shortage is resolved soon so that the office staff and teachers can go back to normal. But until then, I'm very lucky to have these 4 dedicated staff members at Piedmont Hills. And finally, we recognize and honor Cesar Casares, Business Service Account Analyst here at the Ed Center. And kudos from his manager read as follows. Cesar's always willing to go the extra mile to ensure the job is completed and completed well. After years of hearing about the new accounting pronouncement, and this is well beyond my expertise, GASC 84, Cesar had to learn, initiate, and reconfigure the accounting system ASB Works for all the high schools. With any first-time implementation, there were unforeseen obstacles at the beginning of the school year, which Cesar troubleshooted and diligently fixed in a timely and dedicated manner for each and all high schools. Truly a lifesaver for the first day of school. He does a great job in supporting school finance clerks through periodic meetings, phone calls, emails, and on-site training. We are fortunate to have him on our team. Congratulations to all our honorees.
Thank you very much, Asa. Is that a comment that you were going to make, Mr. Superintendent? Okay. Appreciate the hearing about our staff and how we continue to witness the commitment and the contribution being made by members of our staff, and those who are being highlighted tonight really do deserve, a special moment of recognition before the board. So thank you to everyone. And moving on to item 7.01, our student governing board representative, Paula Escobar.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, you're a little bit loud, actually.
Okay, I'll try to keep my voice down. I don't know how to make it lower on my end, so hopefully it's not too loud from where you're hearing it. But hi, everyone. I want to thank you all for tonight, and I hope you're all staying safe. This project student governing board has been working with the YWCA, which is like a branch of the national YWCA organization across all Eastside schools. There are these clubs called T Clubs, standing up for Teens Ending Abuse. And we talked a lot about what we want as students. And this really included accessible gender neutral restrooms, as well as just being able to stay safe in school restrooms. And we're also talking a lot about our sex ed curriculum and what our hopes are for it, and kind of the gaps that we see with it. And so in fostering this collaboration with the YWCA, we're going to do a lot of great work with them, and there's a lot of fruitful discussion that can become of this, and also a lot of change. So hopefully we can bring something to the board someday in the near future, and we are very excited for this collaboration with the YWCA. We've also been in our bylaws process, and that's just something that's been ongoing. In addition to this, we've also been talking a lot about upcoming elections. So how the student governing board functions is that every year there's a new member, with the exception of the junior reps whose term lasts for 2 years. And so we're going to be doing a lot of outreach. So once we send out the application, I urge you to share it with someone who might be interested in representing their schools and their peers, because it's really just a great opportunity. The upcoming meeting, we're going to take on similar projects, as well as talk about, once again, the bylaws, and just keep on with this ongoing projects, especially in terms of outreach for student governing board members, because our goal from the beginning has been to diversify it more. You look around the student governing board and you see there's a lot of opportunities to just expand it more than it already is. We're still missing representation from a lot of schools, and I think it's important to have students from different backgrounds, different ethnicities. We want students who can come forward with different lived experiences. So that includes including foster youth, low-income youth, first-generation youth. And I think once we really kind of target these audiences and make sure that they are aware of SGB and how they can participate, it'll just make our discussions not only more empowering, but also just include so many students to get on board and empower so many students to get involved in the process and how SGB functions. So I can ramble on about this for a while, but as you can see, there's a lot of big things coming with SGB, and we're very excited to keep doing the work that we have been doing.
Does that conclude your report?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for our Student Governing Board Representative, Paula Escobar. Item point 801, here we may request again for this section to advance any of the items as published, or just keep them in the same order, in which case we would proceed. So, we only have 3 items in this section, so we'll probably just keep them as published in that order. All right, moving on to item point 802, consideration, discussion, and/or action to approve waiver of facility use fees per board policy 1330. Our board member, Brian Doe.
SJSU, San Jose State Student University, VSA Culture Show is a collection of different artistic and cultural expression, from acting and dancing to singing and fashion showcase, and a collective story about the unique Vietnamese American experience. I hope to have your support.
I'm sorry, could you just add a little more information for those who haven't read any packet material?
That's pretty much all I have. I'm sorry.
Excuse me?
That's pretty much all I have.
So Mr. Doe is requesting the use of the theater at Independence High School on April 2 of 2022. And so he's requesting the use of that without facilities fees associated with that per the board policy.
Thank you.
Members of the board.
Move to approve.
Moved by Cortese, seconded by Chavez. If there's no discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it passes unanimously. Moving on to item point 803, discussion and/or action to review and accept the annual financial audit report. And as published here, why don't we just go ahead into the presentation, Mr. Ron Wheelahan. Interim Associate Superintendent.
Good evening, board, staff, students, and community. We're pleased to present the financial audits that you'll find on your dais and then online in board docs. There are 6 total documents. One of them is our financial audit, and 5 of them are each of our bonds throughout the years. We're pleased to announce that there have been no findings last year. And kudos to staff. And in a moment, you'll hear from Joyce Peters from our external auditors working through the COVID conditions to get these done. So Joyce, are you there as a panelist?
Yes, I'm here.
If the board has any questions let's just bring these, adopt these and bring them in as a report on our financial condition. Any further comments, Joyce?
No, actually, you probably summarized them all. The district's reports, it's a district's report. It's a modified report with no material weakness and significant deficiencies. So it's a clean audit. During the year, we did make 2 audit adjustments, and that's the result of a change of accounting principle. Implemented GASB 84, we moved the ASB accounts from fiduciary funds to the district's special revenue fund. So that's the result of that. The second audit adjustment is resulting from including the pension liability in your business type activities. So other than that, there's no other deficiencies. We didn't change anything. It's a clean audit. And then for the board communication letters, there's a lot of qualitative aspects of the communications. Just talking about if there's a policy change and if there's a disagreements with management, and it's no modification, so it's a clean report. We don't have any disagreement with management. It's actually very pleasant audit. During our audit, we encountered no difficulties with your business staffing and your management. And they have been very cooperative and very helpful to help us to move along. So I really appreciate that. And with additional tasks, they have to upload the information, scan and upload it, and then this actually, they have been provided those documents in a timely manner. So our audit team is actually very grateful for your audit business department. So that's the financial statement opinions. And then for federal compliance, it's also a modified report this year because there's a lot of COVID-19 related funds. We actually audit 4 major programs. And then one is related to ESSER and GEAR COVID funds, that's 5.4 million. One is a CRF, which is 11.4 million. And one is the Child and Adult Care Food Program. That's approximately 1 million, and a special education cluster. So with this 4 major programs, we didn't have any findings. It's also a clean audit without any exceptions. For the state compliance with the item listed on page 95, with all those compliance, we didn't find any exceptions as well. It's a modified report. Any questions on the district's audit? No. If not, if no questions, I'll move on to 5 bond reports. For 2002 Major G reports, there's no audit adjustments for the financial statements. It's a modified reports without material weakness and significant deficiencies. For performance audit, it started on page 14 of the reports. We selected 1 million expenditures out of 1.4 million total expenditures That is, that represents 73% of the total expenditures. The result of our test indicated that the district has properly accounted for those expenditures. For 2008 Major E reports, it is also a clean audit, a modified report for the financial statements. For the performance audit, we selected 3.9 million expenditures out of 5.2 million. That represents 75% of total expenditures. We didn't find any exceptions. So this measure is also accounted properly. For 2012 Major I reports, it's a modified report with no material weakness and significant deficiencies and no audit adjustments. For performance audit, we selected 865,000 expenditures for testing. This represents 65% of the total expenditures of 1.3 million. No exception noted. For 2014 Major I reports, it's also a clean audit without exception, without audit adjustment and material weakness and significant deficiencies. The performance audit, we selected 5.1 million expenditures out of 6 million. This represents 84% of the total expenditures. We didn't have any exceptions noted. For last is the 2016 Major Z report. It's also a modified report. For performance audit, we selected 17.3 million expenditures. This represents 58% of the total expenditures, and we don't have any exceptions. So with all these testings, we didn't find any material weakness or any exceptions of the compliance. So in all material respect, it's a clean audit. Any questions?
I want to thank you for your summary of an impressive series of audits, and I'm appreciative that you keep saying they're clean audits, and you received great cooperation from the staff for the audit team and members of the board. Questions, comments, or a motion in order to accept these audit reports?
I do want to thank Ed Bailey and Kelly and team for moving this. I know we had to do an extension given everything happening, but they have worked diligently. And this is just nothing but great news, right? Clean audit. That's what we want to hear over and over again. So thank you very much, everybody who put time and effort into this.
A motion is in order.
I'll move to approve. But I also want to say it's so nice to hear not only clean audits, but pleasant. Like, who says that? You know, that's awesome.
And the motion is to accept these audits.
Correct.
Okay.
Second, and also thank you for your hard work.
Moved by Cortese, seconded by Doe. All in favor, please say aye.
Oh, student.
Oops, student representative, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you, and we have a unanimous vote by the board accepting these reports.
I also want to acknowledge that this is like, what, 8 years in a row of clean audits or more? It's been a long time. And we've had a good run, and I know there's a lot of hard work, diligence behind that. So thank you.
Really appreciate the work of staff just day in and day out.
And it makes
it's
our
reflected in the
bond
audits.
program possible, right? Because our community can trust us. So that's not to be overstated at all.
Thank you. Moving on to item 8.04, presentation, discussion, and/or action regarding review of district's debt management. And that would be Mr. Dale Scott. I believe he is queuing up for his presentation.
I think I'm here.
There you are.
Okay, good. Thank you. I've been asked to come back and give a little more in-depth report on the status of the district's bond program and where you may go from here. One thing I have seen over the years in working on bond programs is and I just want to comment on it briefly before we go into the presentation, is the sometimes dual role I've always noticed that board members play. On the one hand, your job, your responsibility is to provide the best possible education you can for your students. But on the other hand, you're also required to protect the taxpayers. And sometimes that's a series of trade-offs, and it's a difficult role to be put in. So the presentation I'm going to give you tonight tries to find a path through the middle for you on that that you can consider that tries to address both of those responsibilities. So I welcome questions as we go through, by the way. Can we go to slide 2? Thank you. You've seen this slide before, I believe. This is the graphic of the district's assessed valuation since 1997. And why this is important is this is the basis of repayment for all of the district's outstanding bonds. And what is especially important is the growth of that assessed valuation. And so you can see in the chart, the table on the right-hand side, we have at the bottom the average amounts over the last 5 years, the last 10 years, the last 20 years. Certainly you've been at well in the average of 5% per year. Nevertheless, as we've gone forward with these presentations and preparations, we've assumed a much lower amount of assessed valuation going forward, just in order to be conservative. And I'll point that out as we go forward. But still, for the last 15, 20 years, has been a very, very strong growth for this district. Next slide, please. Again, as review, the district's voters have been extraordinarily supportive of the bond measures. There have been 7 bond measures that have been successful, 1 unsuccessful since 1991. In the third column from the right, you can see the level of passage, the percentage of yes votes. You can also see that in the far right-hand corner, right-hand side, you can see there remains about $217 million of bonds still to be issued. $47 million of that is for your ongoing ed tech program, and $170 million of that is for ongoing facilities. And that is going to be used up, as I'll show you, fairly quickly and as planned by staff. Next page, please. Each of those measures that I showed you on the previous page has its own tax rate. And I know this looks a little complicated, and in the past presentations, we tend to put that as one color, so it's not so jumbled. But I wanted to make sure you saw that there's not just one tax rate and not just one outstanding issue. There are, in fact, if you look all the way at the bottom right-hand corner, there's still, bottom left-hand corner, there's still 4 years remaining for the repayment of the 1991 bonds. And then as we look at 2026 and 2030 and 2038, these tax rates, assuming 3.5% assessed valuation growth, not the 5% that's been the average, assuming a 3.5% assessed valuation growth, these tax rates combined are going to fall over time, regardless of what happens in the future. Now, looking at 5, remember I said that there are still some remaining bonds for both that are available for issuance for the technology bonds. This shows the impact and the issuance schedule for those series of technology bonds. We believe there will be one more series. That's the light orange. That will be the impact of the tax rates for those technology bonds to be issued, we believe, this year in 2022. And then on the next slide, there are also the the Series Z bonds. Those are projected to be issued in 2024. And again, you can see the light blue will be the impact of those bonds. But as you can see, they still will be the step down of tax rates, even with the issuance of both of those outstanding authorizations. So because of the way these past bond issues have been stacked on each other, and because of the, I think, very conservative nature of the board in the past in making them be paid off quickly and short term, we have this opportunity to now go to the voters in 2022 and ask them to extend the current tax rates. And I want to be clear, we're not extending any one particular bond measure. This would actually be a new bond, but it would be structured and designed in such a way, as you can see here in the green, so that it would extend the current taxes rather than being an increase in the overall tax rate. And in the table that I've put in, you can see this is projected. That's why I put it in red, projected bond issuances. This is really up to the board as you go forward, but it would be a combination of both facility funding and also technology funding. We put an example in there, but that will be obviously up to the board as assuming passage and however the future board sees fit in putting these numbers together. So that is what is being envisioned to be placed on the gubernatorial ballot in 2022. It's important to note that if you lose that opportunity, or if you go forward without taking that opportunity, then at a certain point you lose the chance to go to voters and ask them to extend the current tax rate because the tax rate is falling. So we're at a stage now where those rates are as high as they will ever be in the near future. And the projected tax rates will be falling still into the future. You won't have that opportunity if you wait, let's say 4 years, for example. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, can you go back to the previous slide, to slide 7? The gray, as I've noted, is the existing projected tax rates, assuming 3.5%. Two things I want to point out that are important. To the extent that assessed valuation grows faster than 3.5%, which it has for the past 20 years, those tax rates will actually fall even faster, because as assessed valuation goes up, tax rates go down. So that's an important component, factor to keep in mind. This is what I think is a very conservative view of what's going to happen with those tax rates. The second piece you can see on slide 8, if we can go to slide 8, and that is each of those bonds that I described at the beginning of the presentation has the ability to be refinanced in the future. And if you look at the far right-hand side of this table, you can see that there are a series of dates that are structured into each of those financings that will then allow for a trigger that will allow the board or future boards to refinance them, assuming interest rates are lower at that time. And I think you're going to see even more savings in those tax rates. And there's one that we have ability to do in this year, which I'm going to give a little more information on. So that was a very conservative view of where you are in your tax rates. I think the fact that your assessed valuation will will, at least historically, grow much faster than we're showing. And the ability to refinance these into lower interest rates is going to make that combination of tax rates fall even more quickly. One more note on that one refinancing. This is an example of the type of savings, and this is going to be one of the smaller ones, frankly. The rates are going up a little bit, so the savings might be not quite as great as they were when we put this together a few weeks ago. But right now, we're projecting that really by doing very little work in terms of on the district staff, there would be approximately $1.5 million of savings. Not a huge amount for a district your size, but for the size of this financing, a present value savings of over 8.6%, which is very healthy. And there's no reason not to proceed, in my opinion, to obtain these savings for taxpayers. So I'm going to turn to the timeline and what I'm going to suggest, but I'll stop for a pause for just a minute, see if there are any questions on all of that data that I presented.
I don't have particular questions, but I just, over the time that we've worked with you, it's been quite a few years. I've always been impressed with the depth of expertise and how much I can trust and rely on the data that you bring forward. So it is the same for me. I thank you for this information. Question from Member Vonday.
Thank you for the presentation, Dale Scott. My question for you is, are we going to do the survey first to find out what the interest before we launch the on the ballot is that for June election primary, or are we going to move to November election?
Mm-hmm.
Last page.
Yeah, good segue on page 10, slide 10. First of all, I would not recommend the June gubernatorial primary in any but the most dire conditions. I think that is going to be a very, very difficult ballot and a very low turnout election. And so, no, we are looking at the November gubernatorial ballot, which may have its own problems, but I don't think it'll be as bad as the primary. Absolutely, in answer to your question regarding survey, absolutely, there has to be survey research done on this. And I'll come back to that in just a second. This gives a really 2 to 3 year view of how I think the actions of the board and the district could produce where I started out at the beginning, both taxpayer savings as well as additional funds for improvements for the schools. So you can see right up front, conduct the voter survey research. I want to come back to that issue in just a second. There is the issuance of the technology bonds coming at you, which we've discussed. There is the refunding of the 2012 bonds in order to continue those taxpayer savings. And then sometime in the second quarter of 2022, that would be in the spring, if the survey results warrant it, and if it's the desire of the board, there would be a resolution passed that would place the tax rate extension measure on the November 2022 ballot. Assuming that is successful in 22, you would be able to begin to access those funds in 2023. There are additional refundings and refinancings that are going to be available in 23 and 24. And then, as I've talked and spoken in the past, in 2024, there is always the opportunity for a potential partial tax election if the needs of the district warrant that at that time.
So could you refresh my memory on March 3rd, 2020 for Measure J, Prop 39?
Is your microphone on?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, we felt that Measure J. What lesson did we learn? Is that because we had the Measures J on the primary election? That's why we did not get the good result than the general election? Or this is the other pass tax, right?
No, Measure J on March 3rd of 2020 was the teacher staff housing bond. And I would say, first of all, statewide, it was a pretty miserable election. I'd have to go back and check, but I believe less than half of the measures that were on the ballot in March of 2020 passed. So is there a lesson? Yes, I think the lesson is don't get on the ballot at the beginning of a worldwide pandemic. That would be the lesson. You may recall, I recall very well that right before the election, there began to be the issues coming out of the pandemic. There was a problem with the stock market. The presidential primary in California was very complicated. It was unclear who was going to be on the ballot and who wasn't going to be on the ballot. And so people were holding back. There was a great deal of confusion, a great deal of unease, and turnout was not great. So I know it's always tough to lose. That was a tough one, but I do believe that was a timing issue of gigantic proportions, more so than anything having to do with what the voters were feeling at that feeling over time, as you can see, looking back over the past 20 years.
Thank you.
Yes,
Dale,
Member
I
Cortez.
I have a follow-up. So you were talking about voter turnout, Dale. When we think about the East Side, I want to say like in 2018, we had like 60% voter turnout. I think it increased like to 80% this past 2022. What is it looking like? I mean, 2020, sorry. We're just going to go into November 2022. Sorry. I need to finish this caffeine drink. But what do you anticipate being the voter turnout this November?
So for any observers of this meeting, Board Vice President Lorena Chavez is speaking. I had called on Board Member Cortese, but she deferred to Vice President Lorena Chavez. And for those who may not know, on the listening audience.
A very difficult question. I certainly do not anticipate the voter turnout being anywhere near the 2020 November election. I believe it will be closer to the recall election that occurred, which I think your turnout was somewhere in the order of 60%, close to the previous gubernatorial election in 18. I can't give a real definitive answer to that, because I really think it's going to depend on who runs for the governor's race and if there are any other major issues that pop up between now and then. Historically, however, you're correct. The gubernatorial elections have a lower turnout than presidential elections in your district. Let me just add one thing, and that is there is also a major difference that is occurring. Most of you who are elected officials understand this. The percentage of eligible voters in the state of California that are now registered voters over the past 20 years has grown significantly. In the year 2000, the percentage of eligible voters who were actually registered to vote was about 75%. Right now, that percentage has gone close to 90%. So you have two things going on at once. It's not only the fact that turnout is going up and down, but the number of people that are eligible to vote has also increased significantly over the last 20 years.
Board Clerk Cortese.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, Dale. So if we do some polling this spring, so our tech bond is running out and Measure Z is running out. Would this be a bond that would combine both, and how would that work?
Yes, I think that makes the most sense. It would be, again, up to you as a board to decide on the recommendation of staff. But typically, you can see here on this table, we don't want to amortize the technology over 15, 20 years. We would save that for the facilities. There would be a carve out of a certain amount of technology now when needed, and those projects would be repaid anywhere from 3 to the example here of 7 years. So they would be kept separate internally, but as one, that they would still be passed as one bond.
Well, our messaging to the community could be, I mean, we would definitely let them know what we were using the funds for, and that there's this structure to repay back the
Absolutely.
technology bonds. quickly,
Absolutely.
Because, and it would be, you know, I don't know, let's just say it's 250 million for whatever, I just made up that number, but you know, maybe like 50 million is tech. I'm not, that's not even right either, but I mean, would we parse it out that way? So like a certain amount of the bond is for tech and the other bond is for capital projects, or how does that work?
I've seen it done both ways, and I think they both work. My instinct is you should keep that flexible and not put hard amounts on it. Your needs may change. We've certainly seen how needs change quickly over the past few years. Have a schedule that everybody agrees with, but not that we have to live with. So we believe we're going to put X amount in technology. We believe we're going to put Y amount in facilities, but that can move back and forth as the circumstances.
Okay,
warrant.
so you can do that. Oh, great.
Yes.
Good,
Yes.
good to know. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just a kind of general inquiry here. For the sake of discussion, can you play devil's advocate and give us any downside to this strategy that you are suggesting could be the bbest strategy for us to follow? Just someone is.
Well, sure.
And kind of a corollary is that, is there an equally viable, even better in some ways, alternative to this approach? Just, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the downside, and there's really, in my opinion, only one significant downside, is if you lose, which I don't believe will happen, but if you do lose, you have to pay the county for the cost of the election. We have asked the county for an estimate of that amount. We haven't received it yet, but we will have it obviously before the board has to take action. So that's the most significant downside of this structure. Is there a different structure that would work better? If this were a more robust environment, I think if people were feeling better about the economy, better about inflation, if we didn't have the concern about about COVID, I would say you would be better not doing a bond tax rate extension, but doing a larger bond that pays off the funding quicker and provides additional funding for more projects. That information will come back to us in a certain extent in the polling. We'll have a sense of how deep the support is, and we may want to change and tweak this suggestion at that time. So, but until we do the polling, I can't tell you one way or the other whether this is the best or not.
So the action needed tonight is?
There's actually one other issue that I wanted to discuss, and that is part of the action. And I apologize for not briefing the superintendent on this prior. I just received the information today. When we have done polling for the district in the past, we have used a firm that did telephone polling in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese, which I think is important. That firm is no longer in business. most firms throughout the state provide polling only in English and in Spanish. We have only been able to find one firm that does English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. There may be others, but we've only been able to locate one. And their fee, the cost for them to collect that data is about double of what the other firms are. So we're looking at an increase in the cost of the polling of about $15,000. Obviously, I think it would be good to have that information. Approximately 30% of your voters request their ballots in Vietnamese, but that is a direction I would like to receive from the board. And then the second direction, assuming that you want to go forward, is that you give us direction to proceed with the polling and let us know, should we go with the higher priced firm that provides the Vietnamese, or should we stick with the just English and Spanish?
Okay, I would
So-
invite at this point comments from the superintendent on this matter, because you've been
Thank you.
tracking it closely.
Yes, if we do go ahead and say we want to do the polling of the community, I would suggest that, given the numbers involved, that the increase in price is definitely worth making sure that we hear from our Vietnamese community.
And your recommendation to the board then overall here is?
Overall recommendation would be move forward with the polling as
Presented.
looking as presented, and and then come back to the board either in March and April with results and with the cost from the county, so that we can begin deliberating whether or not we want to go forward.
Members of the board, comments, questions, or a motion?
Let me ask one question. So Del Scott will bring back the costs after Del will work with the county and also find the company, the poll company, to do the English, Spanish, and Vietnamese, correct?
Correct.
He's located the firm. If you all say, let's go ahead with the polling, then we would poll, and then we would bring back the results of that polling. And if at that point the county has given him the information as to the cost of it, he would bring that at that time as well.
I
Okay.
see.
I move for us to go with the company that will be able to pull in the 3 languages, Vietnamese, Spanish, and English.
Yeah, okay, so I think the motion is a little broader than that, as suggested by the superintendent, which is the
And,
commission, the polling, and bring back the
Oh,
report.
and bring back the report from the
Mhm.
county on the cost that it will take, right? If for whatever reason this
I
doesn't.
don't think you have to have the action about bringing back the cost. The action that we're looking for tonight, that you would, if you want to approve, or a motion that would approve going forward with the polling,
Okay,
and the polling that would be conducted in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese.
So that's my initial motion. Yeah.
okay, we need a second.
A second.
Moved by Chavez, seconded by Cortese. If there are no comments, further comments or questions, all in favor, please say aye. Excuse me, our student representative, Paula Escobar, how do you vote on this?
I vote yes.
Thank you. And members of the board, all in favor, please say aye. All opposed and abstentions, and it passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Scott.
Thank you,
Very
Dale.
much. Good night.
Really for, making sure that you knew what our needs were and that you came to the table with that option, because that would have been really hard to move forward without having that. So thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
On to item 9 and public hearings, and we have nothing under this section, so we're moving on to item 10. Public members who wish to address the board, are there any requests to speak or to have comments read into the record?
There are none.
Nothing. Great. Okay, moving on to item 11.01, presentation, information, discussion, and or action regarding update on the novel coronavirus adopt resolution authorizing remote teleconferencing meetings.
Once again, this is the item where we took previous action to remove the resolution regarding AB 361, but I would like to go forward with the presentation. So thank you all for giving me the opportunity to present to you some of the recommendations that are coming from the Student Governing Board, as well as the COVID-19 response, their input, what we'll be discussing tonight. Like always, we're going to look at the dashboard with up-to-date numbers, and at the request of some others in the community, we're doing it a little differently now. So what we're going to do is show you each time the previous set of data and then current data so that we can kind of track the changes. And so we'll zero, if you're somebody that just has a post-it or wants to write the number down, or if you think you can hold on to it mentally, whatever you're going to do, we'll always show that we're going to show what we presented at the last meeting and now where we are currently. After that, we'll talk about field trips and a proposal regarding a change to our current field trip process. There's the board policy in Eastside doesn't say that the board actually establishes the process, but has established a policy where the superintendent has a process that's safe, that's in line with the educational community. And early at the beginning of the year, we said no overnight, no out-of-state trips. Based on the input and where we are in with data, input from our groups, as well as the opportunities that are starting to open up for our musicians and our athletes and our club members, I'm going to be sharing with you a change in that process that I'm recommending and just give you an opportunity to opine and input on that. So let's jump in. Last time that we were together, we looked at our 7-day rolling average of new cases, and it come down then from 6,454, and we were at 3,614 as a 7-day positive rolling average. That was last time. As of today, yesterday, that's down now to 1,760. So in the time between our last meeting and now, we've dropped once again from 3,600 to 17. Quite a substantial drop in terms of positive cases in our area. Next thing I'm going to show you, and I wanted to make sure that that I don't want to alarm anybody with this numbers. This data does present itself differently. This is in terms of COVID-19 deaths. This is cumulative. So when I show you the next number, that new number isn't the number of deaths that happened between the last presentation and this one. This is a cumulative number that moves forward. So last time we met, we were at 1976 as a county, and today we're at 2050. Last time we met, when we looked at those that were vaccinated and are for 5 years and older, we were at 88.8%. For those that had received the booster, a 63.5%. Currently, that's once again 88.8 and 63.5. We're now at 89.5 and 66% with boosters. So incremental growth from the last time that we met. I show that to you, and I have a new graph for you because I think this is very important to note with our Omicron variant and also with the high levels of vaccination. Higher level in our state, and it's tough to find a county in the United States that's really higher than Santa Clara. What you have here is the rates, the unvaccinated or the case rates by vaccination status. So of our cases, on a 7-day average, the rate of positive cases per 100,000 individuals, the rate of positivity. And what we can see here are two groups of individuals. There's the orange line and the blue line. The gray is the average between or of all involved. But what we have here on the blue line is the rate of positivity for unvaccinated persons. People without the vaccine have the 7-day average case rate for 100,000 residents is 446. The blue line for those individuals that have chose to vaccinate themselves, that for ages 5 and up, the number is 73. So I just want to make sure that as we're dealing with this as a community and as public health, that masking has been one of our ways that we've worked with this. Earlier was social distancing. We've done the positive contact tracing, but and close contact tracing. But vaccination still remains just a really powerful way of keeping those rates low. This is us as a district on our positive case. Remember, this is a count, not an average. This is the count of positive cases over a 10-day period. And so last time we were together for staff, there were 63 individuals. For students, 583. As of today, that number has dropped to 24 for staff and 204 for students. So we're seeing a decline in our positive rates for staff and students. Yes, you can. 24 and 204. Yeah, yeah. We're starting to see that decline. And once again, reemphasize, each case is important. It's not to say, you know, that we stop worrying because it's 24 and not 60. Each one matters, but we're really proud to see that our community, whether by vaccination and the efforts that everyone is taking, whether it's tracing and quarantining and isolation and vaccination, it's just great work on the part of our community. And you know always that we're looking for vaccination rate, and our vaccination rate for staff at 86% is about just three percentage points less than our countywide. So we just continue to encourage folks to vaccinate. With these changes in our case rates, with our increase in vaccination, and understanding that we're now at a period of time where for athletics, we're getting into state championships and things like this. We did bring forward to the student, before we go into that, we also have additional testing materials, 2,000 for staff for rapid antigen tests that we'll be looking to distribute next week to staff, and they can choose to use that when they want to. We know for some we have a break coming up, others that will be working as well. If they want to choose to test during that time or later, that's available to them. And then we'll also be keeping the 2,500 tests for students, knowing that, as I was saying, that end of year activities are starting to open up for students, that we are proposing a change in the field trip policy or process, excuse me, not the policy. The policy would stay the same, but the process. And essentially the main difference for this would be that still no out of state because of the variance of different states and the precautions that they take. And some states that have very much higher case levels than California, that currently still no out of state field trips, but to allow for overnight field trips within the state of California if participants in that field trip or event test when leaving and then prior to returning to a classroom. So our schools would coordinate when submitting their field trip paperwork for in-state experiences that are overnight to make part of that, to make sure that it's clear that they'll be following the masking guidelines that are in place, but also that a participant would have to agree of testing the day before going or day of, and then upon return, test before returning to classes. Whether that would be done at the site on a Monday morning, whether that's done at a team level, returning when they get off the bus, or whether they need assistance from the district for us to come here on a Sunday and for us to test them in the parking lot and just get everybody cleared so they don't miss any of their classes Monday morning. Or if the site, because if we can schedule it, that we can bring greater support on that Monday morning for those that are returning. That's to allow for their experiences, allow for the overnight in the interest of public safety to make sure that we test negative prior to going and upon return. And in speaking with the student governing board, they were, I think they were ready for that. In talking with the COVID task force, I don't want to say that. They said they were ready for that. And in speaking with the COVID task force, definitely feeling like this is a judicious move, that it allows for the student experience that we want to grow back towards, but feel that with the testing requirements, that the precautions are in place to maintain our public safety. There was some discussion about allowing for out-of-state trips, but both groups at this point were not fully ready for that. In the discussion around that, and we will continue to have the discussion, some of the ideas about opening for out-of-state would be only open up to out-of-state opportunities if the positivity rating and vaccination status of that state is equal or less than California's, but not higher. And that whatever protocols are in place in California were also in place in that state. But there's not a strong support from either group to implement that process right now. We know that as a state, we might be getting some guidelines. And so we'll continue to monitor the data and the guidelines here, and potentially could change that process. But that's kind of the early thinking. But for sure, we are looking, both groups are recommending a change in this process for in-state overnight with testing prior and upon return.
All right, Do we have to make?
There's no motion required because the policy exists, but if you want to give input or weigh in
Oh.
on how we, how
Is
we
this where
go
we say
about
yeah,
this.
Glenn, or no, Glenn?
What's that?
Is this where we say yes, Glenn, or no, Glenn?
Yeah, I said, Glenn, I would not advise you to do that or something like that.
No, I think this is a good middle point in us, continuing to support our students and not just being in school, but trying to get back to, I don't like the phrase new normal, but if y'all have another phrase, and please share it with me. But the essence of that, and I really do appreciate the before and the after, just to be responsible, right? And it sends a message to the students, aside from making sure that we protect our community, that is the orientation that we should take. So I do appreciate this approach, and yeah, let's see how it goes.
Well, President.
So there is no action required tonight. Member Lay?
I'm glad to see the result of the Santa Clara County COVID-19 case dashboard, and your presentation has very positive result.
So Member Lay, I can actually hear you, but when I ask you about your microphone, it's for the people who are listening
Okay.
online that they can.
Can you hear
clearly
me now?
you.
I have to take off my mask. My question is, the student right now, do they have a lot of students that involved in independent study, or they still on the side that because the Omicron variant, and are they keeping the same status and the same result?
So we had independent study. We had independent study at the start of the year. We offered that. We had about 600 students participating in that. When Omicron first started in January, or when we returned in January, we saw another about 120 or so additional requests. Some went forward with that. Others, ultimately it is a family decision. So yes, we did see an uptick in requests in January when we returned. And that's still available to our community.
Thank you. That's all I have.
And just a comment that I participated in both. Well, and I'd love to hear from Paula if she has any more to say about the Student Governing Board's position on this. But I did sit in on the COVID task force. I think the one thing that's clear about COVID, the one thing we can count on is that it will change. And so I'm fully supportive of this because hearing from parents, hearing from students, it does allow people to assess their own level of risk, because not everybody's the same about this. Some people are very risk averse, and that's okay. Some people are not, and that's okay. So I like that this is a way that allows people to make their own choices, but still be responsible for the others. So if everybody tests before they get back, that's really our way of making sure everybody's safe who's here. But I want to make sure that that we will continue to revisit this. So even like out of state, this is going to change, right? Even in a month, that will change, right?
The first line of next step is monitor guidelines and make changes as appropriate.
Well, there you
because,
go.
if we get a new variant or there's a spike because of a February break, right? We could see that in 2 weeks. And
Right.
if we believe that warrants enough to change either this existing program, become more restrictive again, or if we're seeing different data and that allows us to open it up for more out-of-state travel, we'll do that, but we'll do it judiciously.
Sure. Yeah.
I want to thank you for naming both those groups, the Student Governing Board and the COVID input group. And what I really appreciate about both groups is not everybody agrees, right? And that's something that's really, COVID, there's strong opinions on both sides. And I've just been very appreciative of our parents and our teachers and our students and staff members that have been contributing in a way that keeps the conversation productive towards the outcomes we want, even though there's not always 100% agreement.
Okay, Does that conclude this?
That concludes that, but there are public speakers on this item.
Oh, very good.
Excuse me, written public comment.
Okay, let me call on
sure.
our student representative, Paul Escobar, for a comment, and then we'll hear the written comments.
Yeah, so we did talk about the kind of this topic that Mr. Vanzi brought up about like what we're feeling with like traveling now and like in terms of like in school groups. And we talked about that the last student governing board meeting. And I feel like most student governing board members were comfortable with traveling within the state. And there were some worries still about going out of the state just because of different state protocols. You know, people talking about lifting up mask mandates in different states and like, you know, like other states just don't kind of follow the same guidelines that we do here. And so like those things are very different. And so there were some concerns about that, but I feel like within the state, there's still some opportunities there. And like, it's good to kind of ease into it and also be mindful of how the cases are progressing, because it's still important to maintain safety, you know, emphasize testing, emphasize vaccinations, and at the same time, balance that out with giving our students opportunities outside the classroom, such as going to tournaments, going to senior trips, going to all these things that they have been looking forward to for years. And so I think as we move forward, it's important to kind of balance those two things out and especially prioritize like how we like welcome back our students and making sure that they're safe and that whoever they come in contact with is safe. Because as a district, we have the resources right now to make sure they're getting tested, and they have masks and all these different things. And so I think really checking in with students is like such an important thing, because that's how we can keep our numbers down and make sure that everyone's doing okay.
Thank you. And other comments, please, written comments?
We have written comment from Ed Cashin, taxpayer. Socially distanced space, and Manuel Herrera can't be bothered with wearing a mask. Yet students and teachers are required to wear masks, and there is no social distancing in the classroom. Isn't there a blatant inequity there? Should teachers and students follow Mr. Doe's and so many others in your meeting? Example, and drop their masks every time they need to speak in a classroom. That is the end of public comment under this section.
Thank you. Point well taken by our commenter. And I somehow lost my mask. I was waiting for one to be delivered to me. Thank you. No other comments. Then we're going to move on to item 12.01, presentation and or discussion regarding supplement to the local control accountability plan. Associate Superintendent Teresa Marquez. And this is a full presentation we're going to have.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, board. Once again, Teresa Marquez, Associate Superintendent for Ed Services. It's been a while since I've been up here in front of you, so it may take me a little while to get back into my groove of presenting to you as well as to our community, but it gives me great pleasure to once again be here to share with you an update on our metrics as well as expenditures for the 2021 LCAP, and to provide for you yet another change that has come across from our California Department of Education. Next slide, please. So one of the changes that came about as a result of the governor's 2021-22 Budget Act is that there was an expectation on school districts to be able to provide an update, and an update specifically that spoke to how we were using the added one-time funds that came to us as a result of the Budget Act and any extra federal dollars, in particular, the COVID relief funds. And so as part of the LCAP process, this expectation is that we provide for you through a plan, an update as to how we use those funds and how they align to our goals, share with you our outcome data that we have available currently for this year as part of our 21-22 LCAP, as well as give to you a synopsis of the mid-year expenditures. Where are we when it comes to the expenditures that we stated we had within our LCAP as we approach the second semester? And so this is a new requirement that I bring to you. But again, as with everything that we do in our organization, or we're trying to do, is to not look at it just as a compliance component and a requirement, but really look at it, how does it frame within the world of Eastside, within the goals that we're trying to achieve, within the lens that we take. And so I want to set the stage for you and our community that the lens that my team took in approaching this particular requirement as in preparation for not only the plan, but the update that we will be presenting to you was that is of what our ultimate goal is for our kids. And we begin with that promise of college and career readiness for our students that is indicated through the graduate profile that outlines the various skills that we want our kids to be able to have so that we say they're college and career ready. This, of course, then is grounded in the communities that we're trying to build, which we're all very familiar with that goal of building equitable communities. Our promise is that of college and career readiness. How we, as a district, are going to approach that is by building those equitable communities. Students are welcomed as they are. We know their areas of strength and growth, and we support them. The adults positively respond to the various needs that our kiddos are coming with, and that when they're in the classroom, that they're going to engage with those assignments, those tasks that are really going to push their strategic thinking so that we live up to that promise of college and career readiness. And the approach that we've decided to take is that of a systems response. We know that a lot of times there's those individual efforts that we know we have to take, right? And we know that things bubble up and we go and we do a home visit and we go and we give a kiddo a backpack if that's what they need. But when we're trying to address and align not only our finances, but look at the outcomes, we have to approach it through the lens of a systems response. How do we do this not only through policy, but through our practices that will hopefully open up that access to allow truly all our kids to be able to achieve at high levels. And of course, we know that we do this with equity at the core, right? That it is our obligation to be able to say, what's our role in this? What's the system's role in ensuring that we're going to live up to that promise of college and career ready, that we're going to live up to the direction we're headed, which is equitable communities, and that we're going to ensure that every kid gets what it is that they need without having to say, well, because you're this or because you're that, you're already predicted to be able to have X outcome. So the key question with the supplement part of the legislation is essentially what I posed to you when I began. How did we use the allocated one-time funding in alignment with the LCAP goals? And so I hope that you had an opportunity to review the plan. I'm not going to go through the entire plan with you. What I have for you is more of a synopsis and an update. But the main piece, back to the other side, please, sir. Thank you. The main piece for this particular plan that I just want to point out to is that my team did a phenomenal job of being able to really take the expanded learning opportunity grant plan, those funds, the ESSER COVID dollars and that plan that was also presented to you, the educator effectiveness grant dollars, and really look at it through that lens of what are we doing for our students as a system? And so there's tons of alignment. And that summary table that you see there speaks to those key areas where we saw alignment in our action items and the dollars that were spent in those key items. And again, you'll see it more thoroughly in the template that is attached. So for the main content of the presentation, what I have for you, I want to give you an overview of how it kind of came about from our team reflection. We're going to start off with each of the 5 goals within the LCAP. We're going to share with you just some key successes and challenges from some certain action items. And we selected the action items that were actually kind of across each of those funding sources, across each of those plans. Then I have the fabulous Kristen Keene, who's going to come in from the Zoom and give you some of those key metrics for the goal. So you could kind of see, here's the goal, here's some successes and challenges we've had, and here's some of those outcomes. And then we're going to close each of those goals with, and here's how we've spent, here's how much money we've spent so far up to this year with that particular goal. After each of the 5 goals, so you're going to kind of see the cycle through, right? After the 5 goals, I'm going to just kind of conclude with an overall summary and some next steps. So let's get into it. Just a reminder, we have 5 goals in our LCAP that speak to college and career readiness, graduation rate, our targeted achievement of English language learners, how we respond to behavior, and then our attendance and chronic absenteeism. So goal number 1, right? For us, college and career readiness means that we're providing high quality instruction, learning environments that address not only the academic, but the social emotional aspect of that whole child. And for us, we've adopted the framework of multi-tier systems of support. And so you can see this probably looks familiar because I brought it to you about a year ago when we were entering into the cycle of the local control accountability plan. Key metrics, A through G completion rates, and our on-track rates. Some key items listed there, and this one is where you see our counselors, where you see our professional development, where you see that added position of the multi-tier system support teacher on special assignment, and that inclusion specialist, who I believe just at the last board meeting, they came and did a presentation. So let's highlight just some successes and challenges here. So when it comes to some of the successes and challenges, shout out to our counselors. This week actually is National School Counseling Week, so appreciations to them. And the theme for this particular week and for this particular round of appreciations is better together. And I really do think that they have emphasized that in working together. And one of the successes is that they've come together to do whole group learning. And one of those topics of learning is really around our career technical education. If we're about college and career, how do we make sure that our counselors understand not just the A through G, but the sequences around our career technical education that we have? Of course, some of the challenges is that you hear me kind of repeat is just the shortage of subbing, which kind of makes it difficult sometimes to pull our staff to come together because now it's all hands on deck, right? Counselors are being pulled into sub, social workers are being pulled into sub, so it makes it a little bit more difficult to do that. Another success that I'd like to point out is the work of our multi-tier systems of support teachers on special assignment. They were in front of you a few months ago, sharing some of their work. And so that continues to be a success for us as we continue to progress with the work of our teachers on special assignment. But again, staffing, subbing shortages is making it a bit difficult for us to be able to move as fast as we want to.
Is that getting better?
It is.
Okay,
Yeah, it definitely is.
that's all I need to, thank you.
I do have to say though, I got an opportunity to go and sub at Silver Creek in the Law and Society class and I absolutely loved it. So I loved it. Next slide, please. And then again, one of the greater highlights that we'd like to point out is the initial work that we started with our Universal Design for Learning. Dr. Cavallero and our inclusion specialist at a previous board meeting shared with you that one of the greatest things is being inclusive with our students with disabilities. And when you look at the instructional framework that would get us to be more inclusive and more accommodating of not just our students with disabilities, but our English learners, and for that sense, all our learners, is that universal design for learning. And I think her comparison that she used that I think I appreciate is building the ramp as opposed to just having the stairs, right? A ramp is accessible by all. So how do we ensure that our instruction is accessible by all? And that's the work that we're beginning with our universal design for learning. And again, I think I'll stop saying, I'll say this challenge for the last time. The impact of COVID has really set us back a little bit when it comes to just the speed or the pace at which we want it to go, having to push back some of that professional development. And so now I'll turn it over to Kristen so she can share with you the data pieces.
Good evening. So one of the main metrics for goal number 1, A to G completion rate, is actually our public 4-year cohort UC A to G completion rate that gets published every year.
Please,
And
state your name again for the audience.
my name is Kirsten King. I'm the Director of Assessment and Accountability for the Eastside Union High School District. So these graphs represent the 4-year cohort UC A to G rate. And let me just orient you because you're going to be seeing the same type of thing for the remainder of the presentation. So the current 2021 UC A to G rate is represented by the green bars, and the yellow bars represent the LCAP goal to reach by 23-24. So The other thing that I want to make everyone aware of is that there were changes that came into play through legislation, AB 104, that changed graduation requirements and affected student grades. And that has made graduation rates and UC A to G rates not comparable growth-wise to prior years. So we're just showing you a status where we are as of the class of 2021 and where we hope to be in 23-24. So in the upper left, you will see the UC A to G rates by the district total, which is the right-hand bar, which unfortunately on my screen now, I'm having a hard time reading that. I think it's, is it 54.1? And our goal is 63 point, this is bad, I can't see it.
I think it's 63.2, Kristen, I think it is.
63.2. And what you can see is the A to G rates for our different race, ethnicity subgroups, student subgroups. And so we have a to G rate of 32% for our Hispanic population, 41% for our African-American population, and is that 93? What it? Okay. Teresa, what does it say for Asian? I cannot see it.
83.
83. Thank you. And so we see that our Hispanic and African-American students have lower A to G completion rates than our Asian and white students. And so that's showing where our system is falling short for these populations. The graph on the right shows our special populations of English language learners, foster youth, homeless youth, migrant ed students, students with disabilities, and our SED populations. So as you can see, all of those groups are significantly lower than the district average of 54%. Our students with disabilities is down at 7%. Our English language learners are at, I think that says 36%, 20? Okay.
26, yeah.
Thank you. And our foster youth at 23%. So we see significant differentials for our specialized populations as well. And you can go on to the next slide. So the main 4-year cohort A to G rate is a 4-year statistic in that it takes students 4 years to complete high school and therefore graduate and become UC A to G eligible. So we have created a metric that's an on track for A to G, and that looks at each grade level after they've completed that grade level right before they go to the next grade level. So it includes summer school recovery opportunities. And we look at the percentage of students that are on track for A to G in 9th grade, 10th grade, and 11th grade. And you'll see the 9th grade in blue, the 10th grade in orange, and the 11th grade in green. And the yellow columns represent the LCAP goal for 23-24. So for 9th graders in the class of 2021, we saw that overall 48% of those students were on track for A to G. And the goal for them to reach in 23-24 is 65%. So for 10th graders, it was 39% on track. And in 11th graders, 32% of those students were on track. And so we can see that the on trackness is actually decreasing as grades increase. When you look down the chart, you can see our significant subgroup populations by race and our specialized populations. And we see that African-American and Hispanic students are less likely to be on track at each grade level than their Asian and white peers, and all students as a whole average. when we look at our EL students in ninth grade, 20% of those students were on track for A to G, and that decreased to 5% for 11th graders. Our students with disabilities, 5% were on track for A to G at the completion of ninth grade, 2% in 10th grade, and 1% in 11th grade. So we see that we have a lot of work to do there. Our system needs to support those student groups better for being on track for A to G. The graph to the right just shows you a comparison of what we've looked like over the last 6 years in terms of on trackness. And it's maybe increased a few percent here and there, but it stayed pretty even. So hopefully with some of our actions within the LCAP, we can make this metric move.
I have a question here. If I look at the ninth graders, I'll put it closer. Can you hear better? Okay. So ninth graders for 2021, I see 48%, but don't our students start with A through G in A through G classes? Isn't that like an automatic?
They do. So our default curriculum is A through G, but we're looking at how many of those students when they get their credits end up actually passing the courses with a C or better.
Got it. So this is the end of the year.
Yeah, this is the end of the year when you look at after their ninth grade year of the courses that they took, how many of them were able to get a C or better in those A through G classes.
Yeah. Yeah. Then this is a reflection of this past year in COVID, because I feel like these numbers are smaller, or are they pretty consistent with
Well, you can
previous
see the
years?
graph. So that's why Kirsten went ahead and on the right here gave you the kind of trend so that you were able to see where we've been with each of the grade levels.
So the blue, these are like years before. So it was 55 before, and then 53 and 50. So each percentage is a year.
Yes.
back.
But remember, right, the 2015, 16, 9th graders become the 2016, 17, 10th graders, and then they become
That's
the
right.
2017, 18th, 11th graders. So you could track it that way as well.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, next slide.
I believe our student liaison has
okay.
has a comment.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Is there any possible way to like disaggregate the data under Asian? Because Asian is such like a broad term for such a diverse like group of people. And I wonder like if we'll be able to see like some like needs if we like focus more on like what that Asian like demographic encompasses. Like we might see like language barriers that are not being addressed, or cultural barriers. So I think like and same thing with like Hispanic, with like so much diversity within Latin America, and like how we like kind of group so many different students from different backgrounds together under those terms. So I'm wondering if there's any way like to tell that, or like that was just like something that popped up when looking at this data.
I have a partial yes for that. We can disaggregate by the Asian population, but unfortunately, California doesn't collect specific ethnicities under the Hispanic population. So we can look at that data, and we'd be happy to share it with you.
Yes, please. Love to see that in futures presentations. I also curious, I noticed the goal. How do you determine what percentage do you identify the goal should be, other than a hope and desire?
No, it's actually, so Kristen and I actually talk about that in building the LCAP. And so one of the things I do want you to know is that when the LCAP was built, it's a 3-year plan. And so the baseline data that we use for this 3-year cycle was actually 2019, 2020 data, which is a little bit different than what Kirsten's showing you. But what we established was a 10-year growth, because in looking at trends and patterns, we saw that a 3-year growth was possible each year. And so when you accumulate that, we said, okay, let's shoot for 3-year growth each year, which gives us, 9 over the 3. But he said maybe, let's add for, that cushion of being able to say, hey, we're going to increase by the 10%. And so it was looking at patterns and trends, and that's how we determine a 10% growth.
Would it be too much to ask that next year when we have a similar presentations, if you can share with us, where we are, this is our goal, where we are, and what we need to do to be supportive of the district so that we can move where we really need to be.
Yeah, which is why she added the goal on this one here. The only thing is that she used up-to-date data, which is the 2020-21, where the LCAP, because it's kind of a year behind, right? It was built off of 2019-2020 data points.
Is there a reason why, if you look at a lot of these subgroups, it's 10% increase, like African Americans between, well, a little bit more than 10, like about, let's just say 14%, whatever that is. You look at Asian, that's almost 20%. You look at Latinos, that's like 10, 14%. Why
Yes.
is that on the lower end when it's
No, so
already
again,
low?
the targets were created with 2019-2020 data. So if you go back and you look at the 2020-21 LCAP, which is a 3-year plan, when we first developed that plan and brought it to the board and to the community, the data that we used as the baseline data was 2019-2020. So if you review the LCAP, you'll see a 10% growth target for us for all groups. But because Kirsten is using up-to-date data, which is what we have to do as part of the legislation, is bring you current data, you'll see discrepancy between the 2020-21 current data and our goal, because we used as our baseline 2019-2020 data. But the goal and the target was 10% across the board. Although if we're looking to minimize the achievement gap, you always want to do a little bit more for your students and your populations that are under, which is African American and our Latino Hispanic populations.
Yeah, 'cause I was just gonna ask, is that possible to do, like revisit that without messing with whatever we were committed to, given like where we're at, to respond to the current need? Especially when, because you think about what the Latino population is, what, over 40%, close to 50%, and it's one of the lowest. It's at 20, you know that you know
Yeah.
this, like it.
No, and we can, and that's why you do the annual updates, right? To look to be able to see, okay, has there been growth, right? And then what is needed to be able to make sure all our students are achieving at high levels, and so that we minimize that achievement gap.
So is that going to be revisited, or is that?
Yes, so there's, and that's later in the slides, the next
Oh,
steps. I'll share
sorry.
with you the cycle for the next LCAP.
Sorry, let's keep on.
No, that's fine. And so to close out the goal 1, as you can see, we're right on target. Mid-year expenditures, we're right around 52% of what we had allocated for this particular goal in terms of actions. We're right at the 50% mark. So goal 2, graduation rate. And so you're going to see very similar information, very similar data as to the A through G. But again, as a reminder, graduation rate is different in that our kids, for us here, a D gives them credit towards graduation, where A through G, you need the C or the better. And so again, for us, right, it's ensuring that the spaces in terms of learning and environment are there so that our kids can graduate. Some key successes and challenges that I'll point out. Next slide, please. Is our cyber high credit recovery that we have. And that's something that we've been able to keep funding throughout our various plans and our funding sources that have allowed us to offer not only during the school year, but also as part of our summer school offerings. And again, some of the challenges as that cyber high as an after school program or as an extra assignment is extra duty for our teachers. And during these times, it's hard to be able to do your day-to-day work and then have to take on some extra duties as well. And then of course, I think many of you are aware of this. Many of our surrounding districts didn't offer summer school. We've continued to offer a very robust summer school and are planning to continue to offer summer school for this coming school year. And then lastly, super excited about the work of our subject area coordinators. We're actually hoping to be able to bring them to you so that they can present their detailed work around the priority standards. And I bring this to you as a success, because when we talk about our metrics and you talk about those end of year, or even the on-track metrics, grades are a result of what's happening in the classroom, what the kids doing, with the teaching and learning aspect of it. Well, that grade translates to credits. The credits translate to being A through G eligible or being able to graduate. So when you kind of backward map from there, you look at, well, where's the biggest impact? Well, it's in the classroom. what's happening in the classroom. And so for us, what our subject area coordinators are doing is really identifying what's those key essential standards connected to skills that are gonna give us the results that we want, right? The textbook is a tool, right? Are the lessons, the planning shouldn't be page 1 to page 737, right? It should be based on the key standards for each content area connected to the skills that our students should acquire so that they can find success. And so that's a lot of the work that our subject area coordinators are doing. So we're super excited about that as a success. And then Kristen, you want to take over for the metrics, please?
Sure. So the main metric on this is our 4-year public cohort graduation rate. And the blue bars represent our graduation rate for the class of 2021. And the yellow bars represent, again, the 23-24 LCAP goal. So the upper graphs on the left show our public graduation rate by race, ethnicity, and the bar on the far right is the district graduation rate, which is 83.8%. And we have a goal of 96%. So in our other categories, our Asian graduation rate is 94.4 with a goal of 96. Our Hispanic Latino population, 72.9% graduation rate, African American, 76.2. And so we see that our system is graduating Latino, Hispanic students and African American students at lower rates than their peers in the district average. The graph on the lower right shows us the graduation rates by our special subgroups of students. So our English language learner graduation rate was 69.4%. Our foster youth was 50%. Our students with disabilities was 59%. And our SED population was 78%, 78.9. And so we see that our system is graduating English language learners, foster youth, and students with disabilities and homeless youth, SED youth, at much lower rates than the district average.
So quick question.
Yes.
This public cohort, that includes students who've been with us less than 720 days, right? That's the entire.
Yeah, so good question.
Defined cohort, right? Yeah.
So this is the public cohort, which is different than our local cohort. So the public cohort is defined by the state of California, and it looks at when a student should have began grade 9 and expects them to graduate within 4 years. And it doesn't matter where that student entered our system or where they were in grade 9. They could have been out of country, out of state, out of district, or with us in grade 9. And the state expects those students to graduate in 4 years. And that's what makes up the 4-year public cohort.
Thank you.
So like A to G, graduation rate is a 4-year metric in that it takes students 4 years to get to graduation status. So we built an on-track measure, which looks at the credits students earn at each grade level. And we compute that at the end of summer before students go into the next grade. So it includes summer school and credit recovery opportunities. And for just like the A to G graph, the blue section of the chart shows us the current status for the 9th graders in 2021. And it shows that 60% of them earned all the necessary credits before going into grade 10. And our goal for the LCAP 23-24 is to increase that to 79%. And in 10th grade, we had 59% of our students on track for graduation at the end of 10th grade. And we hope to get that to 73%. And for grade 11, we saw 60% of our students on track walking into their senior year. And we hope to increase that to 69%. Below shows us our significant subgroups by race, as well as by our special populations. And we see that those subgroups vary quite a bit in terms of the percentage of those populations that are on track at each grade level. For example, the district average for 9th grade is 60%, and for our Hispanic population, that decreased, and only 40% of that population was on track walking into grade 10. 36% were on track walking into grade 11, and 36% were on track walking into grade 12. When we look at our specialized populations, our English language learners, 36% of those students were on track walking into grade 10, 32% were on track going into grade 11, and 27% were on track going into grade 12. And our foster youth, which very vulnerable population, only 29% were on track in grade 9, 14% were on track in grade 10, and 9% in grade 11. So our system is producing very differential on-track rates for our various populations. And hopefully through some of these resources, we can start to narrow those gaps and bring our students more on track. The right-hand graph represents 6 years worth of on-track data for each grade level, where the top one again is 9th grade, the middle one are 10th grade, and the green one at the bottom are 11th graders. And you can see the metrics there for overall on-trackness across the years. And except for last year with the distance learning, things have been unfortunately relatively flat across the years in terms of making progress in this particular metric. Do we have any other questions? No. Okay. Oh, this is the dropout rate metric. And dropout rate is also associated with goal number 2 because it's intricately related to graduation rate. Many people think that if you are a dropout, it's because you've walked away from high school at some point during those 4 years and you're just not in school anymore. But students that complete 4 years, they complete their senior year and don't graduate and don't enroll again for a 5th year to earn a high school diploma, are also counted as a dropout. And in Eastside, that's the largest percentage of our dropouts are our non-grad dropouts. The district dropout rate was 71%, and the LCAP goal to get to by 23-24 is 1.5%. And this graph is, you want to see lower bars. Lower bars are better on this graph. Higher bars are not so good. So the district dropout rate is at 71%, and our white student group population is at 5.1%. Our Hispanic or Latino population is at 12.7%, African-American 10%, and Asian at 2.1%. And if you look at the bottom right, you will see the dropout rates for our specialized populations. And with foster youth at 15%, our homeless youth at 24%, our English learners at 14.2%. So the thing that occurred last year with the AB 104 legislation was all districts were required to offer students who did not complete the revised graduation requirements for that year to be able to come back for a 5th year if they wanted to complete high school. And although Eastside had taken advantage of that in prior years, it increased last year. And so in the upper right, I represented the still enrolled rates. So these are students that did not graduate and came back for a 5th year. So in 1920, we had 294 students. And in 2021, that increased by 100 students to 394. So that's positive. That means we've kept the students in our system, and we're pushing them towards graduation and hopefully A through G completion.
Okay, so these students that are enrolled for 5th year, they're still considered like in the dropout numbers? Is that right?
No, they're not.
We're
So
enrolling them. So go ahead, Kristen.
Students that re-enroll after being a non-grad, if they re-enroll with us for a 5th year, they are not counted in the dropout rate, but they are counted, against us in the graduation rate. So one way to decrease our dropout rate is to increase the number of students that we bring back for a 5th year who are non-grads by continuing to give them opportunities to graduate.
So they would fall with it. Okay, well, yeah, because you consider the 12th grader as part of that dropout rate, right? Essentially, so that 5th year.
Well, they don't get counted right with their actual class, but if they come back for a 5th year, then we can count them as part of our graduate. But they don't count for dropout because they're re-enrolled into our system.
California has actually started to compute a 5-year graduation rate. And Eastside sees a big difference between the 4-year with, anywhere from a 6 to 7 to 10% increase from the 4-year graduation rate to the 5-year graduation rate by offering students the ability to come back a 5th year to complete high school.
Yeah, I think we need to be reconsidering that more, especially right now with COVID and all the experiences and the loss that our students experience, well, our whole community, but yeah, looking forward to hearing more about that. I keep on interrupting.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Thank you.
Christine King, I have a question on the same slide for the dropout rate. Could you help me clarify the slides has an English learner 2021 is 14.2% down this right. And foster youth is 15.4%, but the goal for 2023 and 2024 from English learner percentage decrease it to 9.5, but for foster youth is increased to 21.7. Could you help me clarify why is that number is changing?
Yeah, so I think what you're noticing is we already met the goal in one case, right? We surpassed the goal for our foster youth. Am I reading it right? No. So I'm going backwards.
Yeah, so what happens is that our foster youth population is small. And so it fluctuates a lot in terms of from year to year. And so when we did the target, it was based off of 2019, 2020 data, which when we look at that was much higher than our goal for 3 years out. Gladly, in this data, we've met our target by far. So in this case, we don't want to hit our target. We don't want to go to the 20 because now we adjust to Board Member Chavez. When we do the new cycle, we'll revisit our new baseline data, right, for this year, and we'll adjust our target, seeing as our foster youth, we did better with them than we had before in this case. And so now we've met the target. And so you see that little difference there because previously the target was based off of 2019-20 data.
So the percentage should be decrease it or increase it? Because I was confused.
No, we should be decreasing. So these should be lower number. The lower the number, the better.
Oh, okay.
That's what good news looks like.
Yes.
Right? So that it's like when the purple bar is already lower than, excuse me.
Yes.
When that purple bar is already lower than that goal, because this one's inverse. You want the lower, the lower bar is what you want. That means probably the prior year, the number was, the purple bar would have been up to here. But it decreased to 15%. So they've already exceeded the goal. And so this is a goal that we would revisit
target
to
of-
see if it's an anomaly because of a certain cohort, or if we should drop the bar for even further. So yeah, that's what good news looks like.
All right, thank you. Thanks for
Thank you.
clarification.
Okay, next slide, please. And so again, in the same scenario as with goal 1, we had allocated about $12.1 million in terms of planned expenditures to meet our targets, and we're right around 56% expended funds. Our goal 3 was specific to our achievement of our English language learners in terms of looking at what are the programs and supports that we can put in place to ensure that they're successful. And key data points or metrics to measuring our progress on this is our reclassification rate, their pass rates in core courses. And so we'll see how we're doing in those. But I do want to share some successes for this particular goal. And we highlight the intake and supportive placement of our newcomers, because we think it's very important that as our kids come from wherever it is that they're coming to us, that we appropriately place them and we provide the supports that are needed so that they don't become long-term English learners, which is our larger population, so that we're able to then provide the services that they need. And so we've been super successful in coordinating services for those students in particular that come to us and are not only English learners, but are a student with a disability. And so we're working more closely together to be able to ensure that we're providing not only language supports, but supports as per their IEP. Kristen?
Yeah, so these are the different metrics that we measure for goal number 3. On the upper left, what we see are the percentage of students that have scored a 4 on the LPAC assessment, which is the data point. One of the data points they need to reclassify as English proficient. They need to score a 4 on the LPAC as one of those points. And we had 20.4% of our students during distance learning who scored a 4 on the LPAC assessment. And our reclassification rate was 4.4%. Which is lower than it has been in past years. And a lot of that has to do with the pandemic and not having a complete set of metrics required by the state of California in order to reclassify a student to English proficient. And you can see that our goal for the LPAC would be to increase that to 25% and to up our reclassification rate to 20%. The chart in yellow next to it is actually a measure of trying to push more of our English language learners in our system to be in on-grade level college preparatory coursework. So this looks at what percentage of our English language learners are in the 3rd level of English for high school English, and that's 44.1%. What percentage are in the 3rd year of math, and that would be the typical 3rd year, so math 3 or higher, and that's 32.9%, and 23.1% of our English language learners are in a 3rd year of science that's beyond biology or chemistry. And those are the metrics needed that we're measuring, and you can see the relative goals right next to it for what we're hoping to achieve in 23-24. The green graph is actually data from the first semester of this year. So the first semester of 21-22, and it looks at the percentage of our English language learners that received A, B's, and C's, which those are the grades required to earn UC A to G credit in English, math, or science A to G courses. And those are the courses that we were looking at. And we see that for English, it was 47.9%. In math, 49%. And in science, it was 56.9%, earning A, B's, or C's. And you can see the target goals for 23-24. So we're hoping to keep pushing those even higher. Questions on these metrics?
And so for this particular goal, we allocated our planned expenditures was about $3 million. And we're not quite at the 50% mark on this one. We're right around 27. And one of the reasons for this, one of the action items was to hire bilingual para educators. And so we still haven't been able to fill all the positions. The position has been posted, it's been reposted. And so we're still working to be able to hire those positions. And so that's why we're a little bit less than the 50% mark in this particular goal. Goal 4 is our behavior responses in terms of looking at supporting our students so that our school sites have those healthy school cultures where we're able to respond to the varying needs of our students and that we're looking at other means of supporting the students and trying to limit our exclusionary practices such as suspension and expulsion so that we're able to keep our kids in class, because we could see by the data that's just been presented to you that we definitely need to do that. And so some of the successes that we've had in this area are specific, of course, to our mental health and wellness. We've added social workers across our system. And so each of our sites now have an added social worker to support our students. We're looking at ensuring that our social workers, mental health specialists are supported and trained in delivering tier 1 support to our students, because we know that even with 2, at a school of 3,000, it's difficult. So how do we maximize their expertise to being able to support our students? And then, of course, we're super excited about being able to continue the work and provide other options such as the telehealth that we've entered into a contract to provide services for our students who are in independent studies so that they also have access for some mental health support. And then continuing our work with our UBR, and looking at how does it become a tool as opposed to something that is a barrier, as opposed to a barrier to being able to respond positively to student behavior. And then looking at professional development that is specific to trauma, being as now, unfortunately, many of our kids have experienced trauma in one way or another as a result of the pandemic. And looking also at how do we take care of our adults in terms of that compassion fatigue that happens. Again, as I've mentioned before, one of the biggest challenges is being able to actually provide the professional development when you have a limitation around subs. And so metrics, Kirsten, you want to take it?
Yeah, so one of the metrics that we look at for goal 4 is suspension rate and suspensions. And actually this data is also from this year. So it looks at suspensions from the beginning of the school year through January 28th of 2022. And we're doing this because of distance learning last year, there was not anything to report. So these are a progress suspension rate, or where we are at this point in the school year. And we see that this overall district suspension rate is 2.4%. And again, we are below the goal that we are expecting to see in 23-24, which is a good thing. But we're only halfway through the year. So hopefully we can continue to keep it below that. What we do see is differential suspension rates based on our different subgroups. We see that the Black African-American suspension rate is 8.6%, and our Hispanic suspension rate is 3.9%. Our Asian suspension rate is 0.4%. So our system, we are suspending African-American Black students at higher rates than our Asian and white students in the district average. And when you look at the graphs to the right, this looks at our specialized populations. The suspension rate for our students with disabilities is 7.1%. Our socioeconomically disadvantaged students at 3.5%, our foster youth at 15%, and our English language learners at 3.7%. So we are also suspending our students within our specialized populations at higher rates than the general population.
Question on this. So when we look at the goal for suspensions, so for example, African-American students, it's 8.6 is the current rate and the goal is 8%.
Yeah, so this is similar to the dropout rate. So this data is not complete. We wanted to give you up-to-date data this year because again, last year in distance learning, we didn't have numbers. There was no suspensions. When you look at it, there was that because of distance learning, kids were being suspended. This year, as we return to in-person, we wanted to give you current up-to-date data. The targets were established based on pre-distance learning year. And so when you see, for the example that you've just shared, board member, the 8% for the African-American was the target because that was lower than what at the rate that we had suspended them in 2019, 2020 full year. Currently, unfortunately, as of January 28th, we can already say that we have not met our target, right? They actually are above where we were hoping to reduce it. However, if you look at it for, let's say, our district-wide total, we were saying, okay, based on 2019-20 suspension rate, we want to decrease to 3%. This year, as of January 28th, we're already at 2.4%. Hopefully, we can level off and either stay at our target or not surpass our target of 3%. But currently, these are the numbers that we're at for this particular school year.
So, but wouldn't we want, I mean, the goals that we've set are still disproportional.
Yes.
So wouldn't we want the goal to be
Yes.
in proportion to
Yes.
the population that
We
they
do, and we
represent?
also, when writing the LCAP, we also know that we have to write goals that are realistic and that are going to allow us to be able to track the progress towards meeting that target. And so ideally, aspirationally, yes, we would want to make sure that the target is at minimum proportional to the overall enrollment of our students, or for that sake, if we're really going to the extreme, say 0 suspensions and expulsions, right? If we're truly being aspirational and looking at other means of correction. But yes, you are correct that when we look at our targets, could we say, can we just at minimum say there will be no disproportionality, that it will be at minimum proportional to the enrollment of the students? Definitely. It's just the looking now at having to do it in extremes measures. And I think the next slide, Chris, can you show the next metric so you can kind of see, actually the next one, Mr. Van Der Zee? The task at hand. And so on the left-hand side, you see the population distribution by race and ethnicity. So for example, 47% of our student populations are Hispanic, yet they make up 76.5% of the students who are suspended. And so the goal should be, well, at least it's proportional, right? So 47%, the graph should look the same, or the pie chart should be the same. So we're saying that we need a decrease of about 30% from one year to the next in terms of our suspension rate, where we can totally, absolutely aspire to that and put that. When we created, we were looking at incremental changes across that we knew were a little bit more realistic.
Okay, so the goals are based on our history rather than the aspiration.
The aspiration,
okay, I
yeah.
get that. All right.
Because we're expected to demonstrate that progress in those targets. And so even when we look at the state dashboard data, when they bring it back, and even from before, they're growth targets for us to be able to meet.
Okay, got it.
I don't know if this is already where you're headed, or where we're headed as a district, but yes, I understand that we need to start where we're at and figure out a realistic goal. But I think the approach should be like wherever there is more for equity purposes. Like, what does that mean? It doesn't mean 10% in every subcategory, right? So when we look at our goals moving forward, that would be my push, not to have 10% increase in every single one. Like relook at it. It might be a little bit more, a little bit less in certain areas or certain subgroups, just to really get to that equitable place.
Yep, I'm in agreement with that. We can definitely do that to minimize the achievement gap, with the understanding that when we present the data, right, you may not see that intended growth, or maybe a little bit further out. Yes. Mhm. I didn't, Jim.
Those are tough questions, so.
Mhm. Yeah, agreed. And that's why I think the format of the presentation was to kind of give you some successes, some challenges on some key goals, show you the metrics that are connected to it so that we can engage in this conversation, right? Because this is the work. This is the work. This is what really the metrics that demonstrate whether we are being true to our promise of college and career readiness, whether we're being true to what we say we're going to do, which is building equitable communities. And so the data tells us that we are for certain populations, but not for others. And so how do we continue to engage so that we're able to meet those targets? And so again, right, looking at the data and setting those targets, that's something we can definitely do to lower that achievement gap. But really, where are the levers that we have to pull? What can we leverage to ensure that it's going to be able to actually make that progress so that it's shown and demonstrated within the metrics? Okay. This is again, Kristen, I'll go ahead and finish off
Okay.
on this one. We have the disproportionality here now emphasized by special populations, which is our English learners, our foster youth, our socioeconomically disadvantaged students, and then our students with disabilities. So just to the conversation, right? You can see that if our students with disabilities make up about 11% of our total enrollment, yet they're getting suspended at a rate of 32.9, almost 33%, right? So again, looking at that disproportionality and looking at how do we address the system response that's going to get us to be more proportionate there. And then the expenditures, we're right on target with this one. We're right at 45% with the actions and expenditures that we have outlined. And then finally, our last goal is around attendance and chronic absenteeism. If our kids aren't there, well, we can't do goals 1 through 4, right? And so here, when we look at some of the successes and some of the challenges that we've experienced with this one. Next slide, please, sir. We've added some child welfare and attendance counselors at our small but necessary schools to be able to really support and target their efforts around attendance for our students so that we can get them there so that we're not, even though they're at a different learning option, we're still getting them and we're supporting our students at those schools. Tons of attendance support in terms of the continuum of things that we're doing, from home visits to expanding our connections with our community-based organizations. But of course, right, with the demand that has been added to the school sites around COVID, that attendance piece has been a little bit difficult to, again, progress and move forward in the way that we wanted it to. And then finally, our SAR process. We're constantly evolving with our SAR process. We're trying to make it more restorative as opposed to punitive for our families so that they feel engaged. And so through the direction of student services, my director, Miriam Adalat, she's revamped it to where it's more personal. It's in a smaller stage as opposed to kind of sitting in here in the boardroom with a bunch of families. It's become more personalized so that it's one family with services being provided by our staff. And so the data points here, you could see they mirror the other data points, the same student populations that are struggling in 1 through 4. You're going to see them struggling here because if they're not, again, in attendance, we can't provide those services. And so how do we re-engage with our students and their families so that they do indeed feel welcome just as they are and they have those services that are being provided. In terms of expenditures, we're right on target with this one as well, 53% of what we planned in particular for this. But I also want to note that a lot of these goals, it isn't just specific to the staff or the action that is being funded through these. Staff across the board are working on these goals, whether it's at the site through our attendance clerks and attendance secretaries, our administration, our teachers. It's a full team effort that is required to be able to meet the aspirational, the target, the growth of our metrics, and the action items listed throughout our LCAP. So I'll close with just some overall summaries. In terms of successes, we're super excited about the new positions that we've been able to add to target the work and really see if it's going to make an impact on those metrics. Again, our summer school offerings have been extensive and robust, and so we're super excited about being able to continue to offer those for this summer. The mental health and wellness centers at each of our sites and the work of our social workers and mental health specialists. The challenges, of course, you've heard me say over and over with each of the goals. The demands that are placed on our schools as a result of COVID have been huge, right? From staffing shortages to having to, every morning test kids and provide the PPE and just the safety measures. And then, of course, limited opportunities for PD based on the staffing shortages. In terms of progress on our goals, just again, right, comparing year to year is going to be a little hard, even though we could give you trends. It's going to be, a little bit hard to compare from one year to the next. But we definitely need to look at our outcomes to exactly what each of you have said in terms of which are the certain groups that the system is not working for, and that we need to maybe change our approach or look at how do we make sure that maybe we set higher targets for them, even though we know that it's going to take a lot more work to be able to do that. And then finally, as a whole, you could see that of all our LCAP expenditures as it pertains to the increased services to our targeted populations, we're right at 51%, which is where we need to be at this point. And so kudos to the business department in supporting and helping the work here. And then finally, in terms of next steps for the goals and actions and expenditures, we want to take this data to the school teams. We want to make sure that they have access so that they could see, here's the district level, but what's happening at each of our school sites and how is it looking at each of our schools. Continue to monitor the progress on our action items. We've been working super close with the business department on top of all the work that they're doing. They have Teresa knocking on their door saying, hey, where are we with the expenditures? So kudos and thank you to Silvia Pelayo, to Ron, and to the team for being able to work together with us to put this presentation together. And of course, engage with stakeholders to gather feedback and input. And finally, the next cycle begins. So we complete the update of the 21-22, and we move into looking at the 22-23 LCAP in terms of what's working, what's not, what's missing, and how do we adjust, whether it's the metrics and the data points, the action items within that. And so you could see here, these are the requirements, but again, the lens we take is one of looking at it through how do we keep to our promise of college and career readiness through equitable community, so we're not just checking boxes. And finally, just wanted to share that with the community and with the board, we've already scheduled our various educational partner stakeholder forums. And so the next slide just gives you a brief view of the various community sessions, student sessions, staff sessions that I have put together with my team that we will be gathering input and sharing with them similar information so that they can give us their feedback and provide their insight as to our progress and what they want to see moving forward. I just want to close with a thank you to our community. Thank you to you, Board of Trustees, that allow us and give us the flexibility and trust us enough to be able to do the things that we believe we need to do for our students. I know currently our metrics don't necessarily maybe show that, but I know that as we continue to just hone in and really stick to the direction that we're headed in, we'll be able to see better outcomes for our students. I want to thank my entire team, Kirsten King, who put the data, business department, my directors, Miriam Adelat, Tim Nguyen, Marta Guerrero, Sharon Cavallero. It was truly a team effort in putting together the presentation that we brought forth to you today. Thank you.
Wow.
Wow.
What a report.
Yeah,
That's really an amazingly in-depth and comprehensive overview, both policy level, operational, aspirational, A++ to you and the team for what you've presented here tonight on the LCAP. Members of the board comments, we don't have any action to take, and we're simply being briefed. Members of the board comments or questions?
I really appreciate that, Teresa Marcus, Kristen King, and all your team, and everyone has put so much effort for the LCAP plan and goals and result I'm really pleased to see, this LCAP plan presentation. Um, I have one thing that I want to ask, that on the goal 5 successes and challenge, you have put on the action number 3, attendance support, parent workshops. Do you have the result of parent workshop, or how could you reach out? And I know every site is different, and what is the result from the pandemic, and how would they respond? Because they are the one that really want to see if the parent engagement, to support our student.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I could speak to as a success is our partnership with Pique. So I know they just finished a cohort at Foothill High School, I believe it is. And so they're cycling through this particular year with our parents. Challenge, I think similar to just what you heard me say, is the time, right, from staff to be able to come out, obviously not in person, having to do it through Zoom, and so making sure that our parents have what they need to be able to engage. But that's definitely one of those areas that we want to take a look at assistance response. I know each of our principals do a great job with having coffee with the principals, getting their parent community involvement specialists to do topic specific workshops. But I think that's one of the things that, as my team is starting to plan for next year, is where do we find greater alignment as a system in the roles that we share across our sites, so that we're offering not just, oh, lucky that you're a parent at this school, but that it's actually something that's provided across the board. And so we're really trying to re-engage and relook at some of those key positions, like our parent community involvement specialist. We actually have 2 community resource specialists up here in Cal and Maria Arce. Like, how do we leverage those positions that are here at the district office to coordinate more effectively our parent workshops? So using using Maria to do more parent outreach. And so Maria's a Spanish speaker, Tree is Vietnamese speaker, so we can target the populations. And then how do we target our pieces who are up here as well, funded through schooling services, to really coordinate those efforts? So I'm glad you brought that up, because we definitely need to do a better job in that area.
Okay, we're complete then?
No,
Oh,
myself and then Brian.
Okay.
Can I just make a note that the actual template supplement doesn't require board approval? We will bring that supplement actually back with the LCAP cycle. I just want to make sure that we're clear that for this particular presentation, it does not require action. It actually gets brought back to the board as part of the 22-23 LCAP cycle.
Okay. Board Vice President Chavez and then Member Doe.
Yeah, I want to echo President Herrera's sentiments and comments around just the appreciation on the amount of thought and just connecting all the dots. I know I'm always asking, well, how is this connected to this or to that and to that? I never thought, like one of the previous presentations, I was like, wow, this is amazing and connecting the dots, but this is at another level. And so I really want to acknowledge that, especially in this moment in time, right? There is so much going on. People are stretched thin. I work with a lot of schools around the Bay Area, and I have to say, factually, we are leading the way. I hear how difficult it is, and for schools and districts across the board, and I know it's not unique to East Side. So to be able to prioritize and think about this at this level really speaks to volume in terms of like how much of a priority this is. So while I will push, I will not be happy with some of the data. That's just where we are, right? And while we're working, we're still thinking. And I think out of this presentation, Teresa is pretty clear to me that you're getting clear on like, okay, this is what I'm hearing from the board and what I think we should go as we fill out these templates and in terms of our goals. So I'm really glad that we had the opportunity to engage in this conversation, this dialogue, to dive deeper and just hear where we're all at, and keep on pushing to really keep our promise to the kids, every single one of our kids, regardless of what group they fit into or they don't, right? So just gratitude, acknowledgement, and while I'm pushing, I'm aware too, it's just that love and excellence, right?
First of all, thank you for your presentations and please send our appreciations to your staff. Great job. I have a questions on the next slide, page 38, at goal number 5, action 5 on the job. Given the ongoing chronic absenteeism that we have, a very high number, how many students are attending the job meetings?
I don't have exact numbers, but I believe Miss Adelot is on the panel. So I purposely, told my team, hey, be on call. There may be a question that I'm not able to answer to. So if Miriam, I'm not sure if you made it to the panel.
I'm here.
Okay, do you happen to have numbers, Miss Adelot, as to our SARB?
I don't have it with me, but I can definitely get the data and share it.
Yes, please. And thank you very much.
Absolutely.
If there are no other comments, thank you again for the presentation. And we're going to move on with the agenda. Item 12.02, discussion and or action to ratify approved school field trips. Associate Superintendent Marquez.
This is pretty standard. This is the field trips that meet the current requirements that we're just asking for approval.
Move for approval. Second.
Moved by Travis, seconded by Lay. If there's no discussion, all in favor, please say aye. Opposed?
Paula?
Oops.
I vote yes.
And I was given a big note reminder in front of me. But, okay, our student representative votes yes. The board has voted yes. It's unanimous. And we're going to move on to item 13.01. Discussion on our action to approve contracts for services over 25,000. Need a motion.
I'll move to approve, but I have a question.
Get a second. You move to approve,
Yeah, I move to
and
approve.
who seconds? I did. Okay, member Doe seconds. Go ahead. Member.
I see that one of the items on the list is a contract with Planned Parenthood for curriculum for sex ed. And I know that this is something that, well, I think it's lower or up higher. Where is it? Oh, Planned Parenthood. There it is. Yeah. This is something the Student Governing Board has been talking about quite a bit. And I'm wondering if it's possible to get the curriculum presented as a report.
I'm
So
also
one of-
wondering, sorry.
Go ahead, Paula.
Yeah, I know you brought up at the IPC meeting this past week, Ms. Marquez. So I'm wondering if there's any way, we can get input on it and see what's going on with that. Cause we were not informed of this until this meeting. And so I'm wondering I think there definitely needs to be connection there with us and what's going to be delivered.
So the contract with Planned Parenthood is specific to the state-approved curriculum that, as part of legislation, the California Healthy Youth Act, we have to provide. And so we don't get a say as to the curriculum. It is dictated by the legislation, the California Youth Act, and it has to be approved to meet those requirements of the legislation. Planned Parenthood meets those requirements. Their curriculum has been approved to meet those requirements. And so therefore, we have contracted with them to provide in the short term an offering to our students so that they can take it as an online module. We are working with our subject area coordinators to have a more sustainable plan for where this particular curriculum is to be provided to our students. Because of the large scope of it, it doesn't just fit into biology where it used to be, right? There's just so much that is involved in the curriculum that Ms. Guerrero is leading her subject area coordinators to be able to figure out, let's go through each of the requirements and see, can one piece be done, through social studies, because another piece be done through English course, so that we make sure that it becomes something that's embedded and not just kind of something that we have to comply with as one of the requirements. And so for the most part, the curriculum is set. It is accessible. That's one of the requirements, is that we must make it accessible for public viewing. And so once we get to that aspect of it and we send the information to our community, we'll be able to then post the curriculum.
So it's available for public viewing, you said?
It is. That's one of the requirements is we have to make it available for our parents. We don't currently have it because we have to first send the letter informing our families of what's to come so that they can opt out if they so choose to opt out. And then we also, as part of the letter, let them know that the curriculum is available for them to view.
Can the board be provided with that link when it's available?
Absolutely,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Okay, moving on to item 14, there is nothing under that
Wait, did we
section.
actually vote?
We need to vote on that. We had
Before
a,
we voted, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, passes
We
unanimously.
didn't get our
That-
student.
got to remember Paul on that.
Student,
Paula, I am.
I vote yes.
There's a little gremlin in my brain tonight. Thank you. Our student rep votes yes, and the board unanimously approves. That was item 13.01 for professional services over 25,000. Moving on to item 14, nothing under that section. Then on to 15.01 to appoint 2 board members to serve on a committee to review the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee applications. Okay, Mr. William, did you want to?
So we're looking for 2 board members to serve. We're looking for 2 board members to serve on the committee to review the applications. The application is up on the website right now, and we are bringing them in. So we're just looking for 2 board members to work with the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee to evaluate the applicants.
Would that be a paper review only, or a committee, or a deliberative process on selecting, or just what does this involve?
Yeah, it would be a committee process. I believe earlier in the year, we decided to have 2 board members and 3 CBOC members to look at,
Does
to
the board
review
any
the apps.
volunteers on this? Okay, Member Doe has volunteered. Anyone else? We need a second board member.
I can second.
Sorry, ma'am. Okay, Member Lay, those 2, Doe and Member Lay will be the volunteers for that.
Can I ask a
CBOC.
question? I thought that we do have chair and vice chair of CBOC, and usually that vice chair and chair will be the person to review the application, or no? Oh, we don't? No, okay.
That's an independent committee,
Oh,
so,
okay.
They have their own chair.
Have their own chair.
yeah, but
Oh,
not,
okay.
not
Oh,
for
It's
this
not
guy.
us. Right.
So we do have, can we have a motion to appoint both Brian Doe and
Oh, we need a
board member
motion on
Lay?
that. We don't
Yes,
just agree.
yeah.
Somebody move that. Moved by
I'll second.
Chavez and seconded by Cortese, all in, oops. Student rep Paula.
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, did you say something?
I said I vote yes.
Okay, thank you. Members of the board, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, passes unanimously. We have the consent calendar.
Move for approval.
Been
Second.
moved by Lay, seconded by Chavez for the consent calendar. If there's no discussion, student board member, how do you vote?
Vote yes.
Thank you. Members of the board, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it passes unanimously. On to item 21 on written reports and recommendations, and we are receiving under 21.02, receiving the Santa Clara Office of Education positive certification letter for the first interim report. And that is just a procedural thing, and we're officially in receipt of that response, agreeing with our positive certification of the first interim report. There's no action required, no discussion needed. On to item 22.01, requesting future agenda items, members of the board. If none, item 22.02 is simply for the record, listing the items that are being tracked from previous requests, and that's for the record. And moving on then to item 23.01, as we're beginning to close our meeting, comments by the Board of Trustees. Member Doe, would you please begin? No comment, Vice President Chavez?
Yes, Just wanted to reiterate, happy National School Counseling Week. The theme to Teresa's point is school, what was it? School counselors and community are better together. And there's this challenge out there to like finish off the quote. And my finishing off is, because it takes a village to support our students. You help make our students' hopes and dreams become a reality. We appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thank you, Member Cortese, or Board Clerk. Board Clerk Cortese.
I don't think I have a lot to say tonight. It's just appreciating always the robust conversation with the Student Governing Board this week. It's very happy to be part of that. And very much appreciating our student leadership.
Member Lay.
Yes, we had a meeting yesterday with teacher at Indy for safety issue with Board President Herrera, but I have to leave early because I have a meeting with Senator Cortese as a representative of Legislative Action Committee. We discussed about funding, school meal, health and safety, COVID impact with trauma, mental health, support for student and staff, and also current instruction, academic recovery. So that's all I have, but I probably will, go back to visit school. And I probably will send the email out. I think it's about time. So it's been like 2 years. I have not gone back. So hopefully that I'm going to continue to, I'm going back to visit the school site. Thank you.
Thank you. And my comment has to do with having visited Independence High School there at the request of staff regarding their concerns around around campus safety. And I will be engaging with the superintendent and soon with the board as a whole regarding what I've experienced, what I'm starting to understand, some concerns that I have. But it was a meeting with a lot of feeling and a lot of on the ground sharing of experiences, and very worth listening to and understanding. So there will be follow-up on that through appropriate channels. Let me then proceed to our Student Governing Board Representative, Paula Escobar. Paula, are you there?
Sorry, I'm realizing I was muted. But yeah, I first wanted to thank SGB because we did have a really good discussion on Monday. And I feel like it really kind of transpires and like you really see like the progress being made. And I can't wait. Like we still have so many months in this year, and although it's going by very quickly, I feel like there's so many things that we're gonna do. And it's very exciting. And I also want to wish everyone a happy Black History Month. I think it's really important to recognize that and also what we need to do as a district to support our Black students, respect their stories, and also uplift their narratives and histories. And I also really want to thank the YWCA for reaching out to the Student Governing Board, and I'm really excited for that collaboration. And that's all I have. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Superintendent.
Just want to reiterate what Paula said when we looked at our data tonight and realized that the work we still have to do with population, including narratives and histories. And if Black History Month, absolutely in February, but as a system for us continue to look for ways to welcome all students as they are and positively respond so that for full participation, that's still a goal for our district, and we're not going to lose sight of it. And I thank everybody in our system who's working towards that.
Thank you. And item 23.04, board meeting evaluation. Any comments?
Yeah, both done before 9, and I always remember the CSBA metric that a good board meeting is 65% student achievement. And with, the bulk of our effort tonight on the LCAP, I think we definitely achieved that goal tonight.
Very good. Moving on, 24.01 legal counsel report from closed session actions.
Closed section, Rogelio is not available, so I'll be reading out closed session agenda 2.04. Motion by member Cortese, second by member Doe to approve the employment of Lisa Lott as payroll supervisor. The motion was unanimously approved by the board. There are no more reportable closed session actions.
That concludes our meeting, folks, and we're adjourning at 8:49 p.m. Thank you very much.